If you take an EpiPen when you're not having, is it anaphylactic shock, or is that the reaction that when you take an EpiPen?
Mm-hmm.
Is that really bad to take an EpiPen if you're not
Well, it
having
could
a
be
crazy
because
reaction?
the whole idea is it's stimulating your heart to pump more.
Okay, well, I'm just wondering about hedging your bets. Say you get bitten by a rattlesnake, but you don't know if you're going to have a crazy reaction.
I would not do that.
You would not do that?
I would not do that. Because that's going to increase your heart rate, which is going to make the venom travel quicker.
Okay. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Wild Dispatch. I'm Robin, and I'm back with more human stories from the wild. Now, I'm excited to say we've got another returning guest. It's actually a buddy of mine. Dennis McKiver is back. He's had a couple of episodes previously. Many wild stories. In fact, his wild story, I should say. Many events in his life in which he has had ridiculous close calls and managed to escape by the skin of his neck. Is that the expression? The scruff of his neck. Anyway, many close calls. I think that's due to him being an incredibly lucky bastard, but also probably a lot to do with the fact that he's had so much training as a parajumper. So you name it, he's been trained in the situation where something's gone wrong. Dennis has been educated in the best way to solve a problem. So I figured, while we've heard many stories of his life, it would also be good to hear some more which give you nuggets of information that could end up being something that saves your life. We talk about all kinds of stuff. Now, actually, I should caveat as well. Dennis has this magical way of explaining a bunch of things which will be really helpful, but then he's also like, okay, I've got this story which explains this thing perfectly. So, in perfect Dennis fashion, he makes this whole learning process super entertaining as well. So, he talks about all kinds of things in the desert, in the mountains, on the ocean, bonus underground episodes that I didn't even know were coming. All this to say, I hope that some of this wisdom that he has shared, well, for me personally, helps save my skin, but also maybe for the folks too. Speaking of which, I want to give a big thank you to everyone who's listening. If you're new and this is the first time, it would be fantastic if you could just pause for a second and follow the podcast. If you aren't new and you haven't had a chance to do it yet, then go ahead and give it a follow. It helps me out. It keeps my listenership consistent and gives me that warm, bubbly feeling, which I think everybody craves in their life, don't they? Another thing that's handy, if you want to get updates when the new episodes are out and available to listen to, then follow me on Instagram at The Wild Dispatch. You'll also see some fun footage of me out in the bush or on the ocean, sometimes with Dennis. Getting up to mischief and fishing, grabbing, hunting, foraging, all kinds of stuff like that. So, a quick note based on that. I'm currently putting things out once every 2 weeks. It's been weekly for the last, 8 months. I'm taking a little bit of time back for myself and making sure that I can get back out there and feed myself both literally with nutrients and also mentally too. So, that means I'm eating into my screen time a little bit, but also hopefully I'm eating some fish and wild game. Which, speaking of, actually managed to get out yesterday with Dennis for the last day of crab season in California. Managed to sling a hook over the side and pull up a nice fat vermilion fish too. So, I want to give a big thank you to Dennis, first of all, for that fishing trip and for recording this episode and sharing his wisdom. And, secondly, I think that's it. It's time for me to stop waffling. Let's get on with the episode. Here's Dennis.
Welcome to the Wild Dispatch.
So then it has to be right there.
Yeah.
Okay, I've also heard of some mics which are like actually on your voice box.
Yeah, and that used to be like, I don't know if you watched the old World War II movies.
Yeah.
That's what they were. They had, the mics were down here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they would pick up like reverberation, which I guess is solving the same problem.
Yeah.
Like gunfire
basically,
and stuff.
yeah,
going off.
so it was like, a lot of times they were tucked underneath your jacket, Yeah.
Let's check let's do a little volume check. Can you hear yourself?
Oh, yeah.
And that sounds good?
Yeah. Sounds
Yeah.
like I'm in the studio.
Yeah. What do you mean? We are in a studio.
We are in the studio.
Maybe not as quite as glamorous as the other studios you know, Dennis.
Yeah.
I won't say
I don't
too
know
much.
any studios.
I'm going to detach from the headphones a second. I'm going to say I can make you coffee, but I actually don't know how. So it's been so many years. Like we have just like grind coffee, the stuff that you hand grind and then pour in.
I'm not a coffee drinker.
Oh, you're not?
No, I never did develop the taste for coffee.
Interesting.
I drink teas,
Okay, me
but
too.
not coffee.
Yeah, I don't drink coffee either. Mostly just because I don't actually have really any caffeine.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I would have thought that coffee would have been handy at some point when you're doing
You would think everybody else I know drinks coffee, but even when I was a little kid, I'd be out fishing when it was freezing cold, and the guys in the boat would hand me a cup of coffee to warm up, and all I would do is hold it. My grandmother gave us coffee that she drank when we were little kids, but it tasted like melted coffee ice cream because it had so much cream in it.
Nice. So then coffee, I didn't drink much coffee in my youth, but I did discover when I went to Italy one time, and my dad was doing a work trip or something, and I got to go. And cappuccino was a thing that I discovered, and I had no idea about the consequences of caffeine, so I think I had 4 for breakfast.
Yeah.
In Italy, Rome.
Yeah.
I couldn't understand why I felt kind of strange. It was not ideal.
Yeah, the first time I went to France, I went over to visit a friend that was over there, and they give you a cup of coffee, and it's like this big, because it's a cappuccino. They don't tell you that, but,
small.
you order coffee, and it's like, and of course it's real thick and real strong.
Yeah.
I thought it was funny because, I went there, and it's like, if you're there, right at rush hour at the end of the day,
Yeah.
everybody walking down the street, riding their bicycles or their Vespids, or everybody was carrying a baguette. Everybody stops and gets a baguette to take home. That'd be fresh every day. That's a fresh baguette.
Yeah.
But it was just, they sell them a baguette. It's not wrapped or anything. They stick it in their pack or, saddlebags in their.
Yeah. It's like it's like the thing you always see in the movies, and you think, oh, that's got to be like a cliche. It's not actually true. But you get there.
You get there, and it's actually true.
It's actually true. Everybody's armed with a baguette. Yeah, it's so true.
Well, that's why I think it's funny. One of the things my wife likes NASCAR racing. Okay. So it's one of the things we do together, watch the NASCAR race.
Yeah.
Well, they got this Shane Van Gisbergen. He's like the most famous race car driver from Australia.
Okay.
He was racing in Australia, but he's from New Zealand, right?
Yeah.
And so he was doing a podcast, and they were asking him, what's the biggest thing that different, that you learned when you came over to here have you ever seen the movie Talladega Nights?
Yeah.
Okay. So he says the biggest surprise to him was that he thought Talladega Nights was a comedy film. He says, no, it's a documentary. He said, people are really like that.
Nice. Right, I think I've got all my ducks in a row at last.
Okay.
Thanks for your patience.
I don't have to read anything. I'm taking my glasses off.
You don't have to read anything. You just have to remember and share your.
That's going to be the
wisdom.
hardest part, remembering.
Okay, well then, if you're ready, then I think we can
Okay.
jump in.
All right. You got a list of questions, or you're just going to wing it?
I could now. It's very hard for me to not do these things without some kind of list. One day I dream that maybe I can just jump in and we'll figure it out as we go. But I think I'm a bit of an over planner, so
Okay.
I'm trying to like not be as wedded to lists.
Probably should have given me your list ahead of time, and then I could have had preparation.
Oh no, but then it's also the in the moment. That's the good stuff, isn't it? And that's the joy of editing as well. Like
Yeah, okay.
if you want to take a minute to think, then we can. It's all good.
Okay.
Anyway, we are going off down a garden path already. Dennis, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you.
Dennis McKiver, he has already been on the Wild Dispatch a couple of times, and we've heard many amazing stories of various moments in your life, usually always around surviving or rescuing people in extraordinary situations in lots of different places. I've got you back, and this time I want to actually really dig a little deeper and gain some of your knowledge and experience, and hopefully I'm sure a few stories too, around, I don't know, this is a working title, How Not to Die Whilst Out in the Woods.
That'd be good.
but it doesn't even need to be woods. I mean, we're going to expand further. You've been in loads of different situations: ocean, mountains. I think even some arid environments as well.
Yeah,
You've kind of got some
desert
training
environments,
in that.
yeah.
Desert. So we've got all of that.
Jungles.
Jungles as well. Okay, well, quick, can we write that down? Add that to the list. Add that to the list now. So, first of all, thank you for coming on. And I mean, okay, so I guess like let's do some overarching things first of all. Like, we chatted a bunch about survival stuff. We had like a few chats over the phone, just so I had a little bit of prep beforehand.
Yeah.
I guess something you used the phrase self-rescue to me before.
Yeah.
So I guess like maybe we could talk a little bit about like the importance of self-rescue, and it's about like understanding that there isn't always going to be someone to save you, right? I mean,
Exactly,
I think it's something
yeah.
like, so maybe that's what this episode is a little bit about as well.
Yes, too many times people think that if they get in trouble, there's going to be a helicopter come in and pick them up and rescue them.
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, that's not going to happen. Mainly due to weather.
Okay.
Or just availability.
Yes.
You know. In the U.S., they passed a law a while back. You know, I worked for the Air Force.
Yeah.
Doing rescues.
Yeah.
And our main job was
Your phone?
probably. Main job was combat rescue.
Okay.
But, you know, when you don't have a war going on,
Yes.
you know, they let us practice doing rescues by, you know, doing civilian rescues.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. And we did a lot of that. And then they passed a law saying that the federal government cannot compete with private enterprise.
Yes.
So
I think I remember you saying this before.
if somebody starts up a fly-by-night helicopter rescue operation, and they may not even know what they're doing, but they may say they do, they've got to be hired to come in and rescue you before they can call the military out to come rescue.
The people who have a lot of experience and also a lot of equipment.
A lot of experience in the proper equipment. And I worked up in Mount Rainier for 3 summers as a backcountry ranger.
Okay.
And there was many times that I saw people get seriously injured and either died or had more serious injuries because we had to call the civilian helicopter to come and get them, and they couldn't call the military helicopter that could have maybe been there quicker.
Yeah.
And for instance, like if you have a dislocation, you know, like a shoulder or a hip or some dislocation, that's a orthopedic emergency, we call it, in that you got about an hour to get that dislocated limb back into position before it starts to calcify, which then your bones, when the joints separate, they start growing calcium crystals on the balls of the joints. And then when they get it back in, you got a sandpaper action there.
Whoa.
So you can count on the fact if you had a dislocation and it was dislocated for a number of hours or even days, when you get it back in, now you're going to be having arthritis at a young age, not too long after that, and then having a hip replaced or a shoulder replaced and stuff like that. Now that they can replace those things, you know.
Yeah, but still.
But, you know, it's an orthopedic emergency in that you got to get it the person to an orthopedist and get it back in, or you got to be able to know how to put it back in yourself.
I had no idea that was such a serious, or like potentially serious thing.
It's a potentially serious thing. I mean, even like a finger dislocated or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to end up having an arthritic finger.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay.
So, and there's cases where, you know, if we'd have called the military helicopter in, they'd have come in there with a helicopter with a hoist capability on there, and they would have sent a paramedic down and bundled the guy up in a litter and hoisted him up the helicopter and flown him back off to the hospital and got him out right away.
Okay.
Whereas we have to call the civilian helicopter, and they don't have a hoist.
Yes.
And the closest place that they could land the helicopter is like a mile away, and then we got to like pack the patient, you know,
to that spot.
If you can find enough people to pack, and you got to pack them to the pickup spot, you know, which might take hours or days. And
okay. So, yeah, it sounds like there's a bit of potential bureaucracy.
But there's bureaucracy in there. It's kind of like even out here in the ocean, like if you're out in your boat and your boat breaks down, you say, well, I'll call the Coast Guard and they'll come pick me up. Yeah. Well, the Coast Guard's going to ask you if it's life or death. And you say, well, no, I'm just out of gas, or the thing just won't start. And they say, okay, well, then we'll get on the radio and we'll call and see if there's somebody out there that's willing to come get you, pick you up, another civilian boat that may or may not know how to tow. And, you know, and then even if it is, like out of San Francisco, out of the bigger harbors, there's private tow services. Yes. First of all, they'll want your credit card or whatever. And it's like a minimum like $2,500, $3,000.
Yeah.
And then plus per mileage tow to tow you back in. It costs you a fortune.
Yeah. So
I know when I went skiing in Europe, you know, they will come rescue you, but you got to put up, if you're especially if you're a foreigner, you got to buy insurance bond before you go hiking into the backcountry or go skiing or stuff like that. It's a rescue bond.
Yes.
So they have insurance that you buy beforehand. We don't. We have the ski patrol.
Yes.
They'll come and rescue you for free.
Yeah.
And whatnot. But they don't. You know, their ski patrol is part of their government. In fact, they're military people. And they'll come and rescue you, but you're going to get billed.
Yeah. Which, you know, which I guess is what you'd perhaps expect.
It's not you expect, but, you know, getting a helicopter to come and fly you out of the backcountry is not cheap.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. So all of this self-rescue context, it's really good to know, and it's actually slightly terrifying, to be honest. Terrifying is maybe an exaggeration, but it's good to know, like, in reality, there's a lot of other stuff going on behind the scenes that happens when if you need to be rescued. You told me a story, which I'd love you to tell, if you don't mind, about like a little two birds, one stone situation where you were at Mount Rainier, one of those 3, I think you said you were there for 3 years, right?
Yeah.
Someone had an issue, and then their buddies came back to get you.
Yeah, so there was, I guess, 3 guys that were out hiking, climbing up, not Mount Rainier itself, but one of the minor peaks around there. They were just out climbing.
Okay.
And one of the buddies took a fall, and he dislocated his hip. And instead of somebody staying there and somebody coming out, this was before, you know, everybody had radios and GPS trackers, you know, somebody had to hike out to get help.
Yes, yeah.
You know, that was several hours.
Okay.
Okay, so they were, you know, they were probably 3 miles back in, and he hikes out. Well, 2 of the guys leave their buddy there with a dislocation. Yeah. And then they hike out and get out after dark, come down to the ranger station and knock on the door and wake somebody up, and it's like, hey, our buddy's, you know,
on his own,
injured up there. They thought, oh, we'd call a helicopter come and fly in, and, you know, they had the coordinates of where he was, and we'd fly over to the helicopter and pick him up and take him out of there. Yeah. So they just left him there. And it's like, it's overcast, it's nighttime, it's drizzling. You know, he's probably not going to survive through the night.
Yeah.
unless you fixed him up with a tent and fire or whatever, a stove and
Right,
they hadn't. They just left him.
They just left him.
Yeah, fend for himself. And so I says, okay. I said, come with me. And then we had a rescue cache with all the equipment we did. And I says, just told him, I said, okay, you two, grab that. Told him, put it in the back of this pickup. Drove him back there. Says, okay, we're hiking in to go get your buddy.
Okay.
And you guys are coming, but you grab all that equipment, and we're packing that in to go get it. And what it was a litter.
Okay.
And it was a litter with a big wheel that attached to the litter.
So wait, what's a litter?
A litter is would be something you lay somebody's body on.
Like a stretcher kind of thing?
A stretcher.
Okay.
Okay, we call them litters.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Okay. That's a translation thing I didn't know about.
Okay. Yeah,
okay.
so we call them a litter.
Okay.
So, and it was the brand is a Stokes litter. They're made out of aluminum. Mm-hmm. It's what you see with a helicopter lower it down.
I know exactly what, with the handles and like kind of the rungs on the side that you can hold on.
Yeah, it's just tubular, so you're
Yes.
just holding that. It doesn't have any handles to stick out. It's you're holding onto the tubular, and then you can attach 4 cables to it to lower it down to the helicopter.
Yes.
But if you don't have that, you carry it in and pack them out. And they're made out of aluminum, so they're pretty lightweight.
Yes.
So, but we had one that was rigged up that had a big wheel that attached to the litter, so you can roll it.
Yeah.
And roll it up over logs and stuff like that. So we, got the Stokes litter and the wheel and put the medical kit in there. And I says, okay, roll this into, show me where you left him, And we went in there, and when we got there, I showed him how to bandage him up and secure his leg and everything, and get him into the litter.
Okay.
And in the meantime, I'd called we were an hour and a half away by ambulance from the nearest hospital.
Wow. From
From the entrance to the park. So it was about 2 hours before they could get there. So I had already called and told them when we needed an ambulance at the trailhead. I figured out how long it would take us to get.
Yes. Okay.
And so we hiked them in there, and they bundled him up and put him in there, and those 2 guys wheeled him out, and I just had to supervise the whole thing. So.
Right. So you were just like giving instructions. I remember you saying this.
I just giving instructions and telling them what to do. This is how you need to rescue yourselves.
Yeah.
And
how did they react?
Well, they were actually excited about it, and especially after the end. They were all happy that they were able to accomplish that.
Yes.
It was like, to them, it was like a wilderness survival class they just went through.
Well, I mean, sure, it was one that they would normally charge a lot of money for.
Yeah, exactly.
With real practical.
The thing you would get on if you took a wilderness medicine course.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love this about you, Dennis, that you took that as an opportunity as well, where you're like, okay, you guys made some bad choices, but now's an opportunity to teach you a few things.
Yeah. And then I impressed my supervisor there, the park ranger supervisor. He was one of these kind of guys that whenever we got a rescue call like this, he was like freaking out and pinging off the walls and everything. It was like,
Yeah.
I said, don't worry, I can handle it.
What time did this happen? It must have been, you said it was after dark.
Yeah, it was like 8 or 9 in the evening.
Okay.
And I think we didn't get him out until after midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not too
But it was like,
savage.
if we'd waited for a helicopter, it would have been the next day, if that. And I think the next day it was raining, and they would never be able to get a helicopter. And we would have
been
went in there and got his body out.
Yeah, that's not ideal.
Yeah. So.
Well, thank you for that story. I wanted to hear that. You actually gave me a bit more info that time, so that's good. I guess. Okay, so I was trying to think about how to construct this podcast in a kind of a bit of an order, and I think we'll definitely do some more stuff about mountains and other environments. But I guess first of all, maybe it makes sense to do some like general practices, good practices for like self-rescue before going off on an adventure or before going out into the wilderness. What are good things to do? And I have a few questions here, but I got a juicy question to ask you before that, actually.
Okay.
You said something, this just popped into my mind. You said something to me about it's not like when you did that rescue and you taught those guys, that wasn't a time when you just push a button on a sat emergency thing.
Yeah.
They didn't have that technology as much at that point. It wasn't as common.
Yeah.
But like that exists more now, and I guess it's a bit of a charged question. Is it a good thing, or are people depending too much on those buttons? Like, what's happening?
Well, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
But just realize, even though you push the button, you're basically telling them where to come find your body if you're not prepared to stay out there a day or two.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
That's the real talk right there.
Yeah. I mean, they may have you pinpointed on the satellite.
Yeah.
But then they got to get to you.
Yeah.
And more often than not, the reason you're in trouble is because you hiked up that mountain and then the storm came in.
Yes.
And the helicopter's not going to be able to come get you if there's one available.
Yeah.
You can't be totally dependent upon those things. They're electrical pieces of equipment that are prone to failure.
True. It's not necessarily always going to be there if you really
Yeah.
need it. So I guess what you can have is your wits about you and some knowledge.
Well, the main thing is before you go out anywhere, whether it's hunting or fishing or just hiking in the woods, climbing a mountain or whatnot, you need to be prepared for whatever might happen while you're out there.
Okay.
So many people go out, the reason we have to go rescue them is because they're unprepared.
Yes.
Okay. I always, when I go hunting, I've got a pack that's got everything I needed if I want to stay out there for a couple of days.
Yes.
Okay. Or if I hurt myself, what am I going to do? So
specifically about that, you said that includes enough warm clothes, water, all that kind of stuff.
You got to have
for overnight in case
you gotta
the weather turns bad.
Shelter, be able to make fire, be able to get water.
So do you have a tarp or something like that?
Yeah, like tarp or space blanket or even a big 50-gallon trash bag.
Yes.
Something folded up like that. We used to carry what we called tube tents, were basically a trash bag with open ends on both ends that you could put a piece of parachute cord on.
In between, like
in between two trees, and put the tube tent over there, and then lay in there, and it makes a A-frame tent, and you could close off the ends with some clothespins or whatever.
That's ideal.
Yeah.
I've not heard of that before.
Yeah. I mean, I spent, I think, a week in a tube tent in a storm one year,
Really?
Yeah.
Where was that?
Well, we were on a hiking trip that was with a bunch of other high school kids. It was like they call it a mountain ecology class. It was just, we had some high school instructors that would take us out backpacking during the summer and give us a summer school college credit or summer school high school credit for it. Anyway, it was on the east side of Lassen Park in what they call the Thousand Lakes Wilderness area. Well, we got in there and it started raining.
Yeah.
And it didn't quit raining. It wasn't just a summer shower. It was like, it rained for like a week. And we were just all, and the thing is, it was supposed to be nice weather. So the instructors always restricted everybody. Nobody could carry more than 40 pounds of stuff. That was the limit.
Yes.
And so we'd have classes before that, and this is what you take. This is when I first started learning some survival stuff other than what I'd learned on my own before.
How old were you at this point?
This was like 17.
Okay.
And this was before I went in the military.
Yeah.
And learned all this stuff there. But I was smart enough. I had some waterproof clothing.
Yeah.
And some stuff that would shed rain. And we had two plastic tube tents. And most instructors told people, well, just bring up some kind of a tarp.
Yes.
That you could make a lean-to shelter out of.
Yeah.
And me and my buddy shared a tube tent together and had our sleeping bags in there and used clothespins to close up the edge and stayed in there playing cards. It was pouring down rain all the time. Once in a while we had to let up. You'd go outside for a little bit but come back in. And then everybody else got soaking wet and people were getting hypothermic and everything. And then me and my buddy and one of the instructors hiked out to call for help for everybody else. And we were fine, but we could have stayed there another week. We thought, as long as we had food to eat.
I guess that must have been a very different experience for some of the other kids.
Oh yeah, I mean, this was their first experience out in the woods, for a lot of them. So it was like
somewhat traumatizing.
It was somewhat traumatizing. I mean, some of them probably never backpacked again. It's like,
well, you're like, this is great. I need to do more.
I mean,
of this.
I grew up basically in the wilderness, and a wilderness to me was going to the city.
Yes.
So being out there, that was where I grew up. So it was like, hey,
it's all good.
It's all good.
Okay, so we've got like making sure that you have all the right gear with you to handle much more time than you actually think, which has actually saved me before as well. I did
and worse weather than what you think.
Worse weather than what you think as well.
Yeah.
I was going to say it saved me and my wife before. We were doing like a backpacking trip across. It wasn't really a trail or anything. It was just across mountain ridges it was supposed to be 3 days and it ended up being 4.5.
Well, like
I always pack more food than I should.
Yeah, well, I know having extra food is good.
It was good. We were fine.
But I mean, a lot of times what people get in trouble, especially when it's up Mount Rainier, but other places, it's like you're going to go on a normal hike, and you don't think of the fact that you have to cross a snowfield while you're there.
Yeah. And
if you slip on that snow, you're going to go 2,000 feet down the mountain. And that was we shoveled snow all summer long up at Mount Rainier.
Yeah.
And the reason being is because we'd have just normal trails, and you had a winter like we just had here, and the snow never melts off of it because it was too deep. And so we make a path across the snow.
Yeah.
And it might just be, 100 feet, but it's in an avalanche gulch.
Yeah.
And people want to get over there, and too far up or down to go around, so they're going to risk going across the snowfield. And if you didn't bring some crampons and an ice axe, I mean, even though you don't plan on going ice climbing, you might want that ice axe and know how to do a self-arrest when you're sliding on, because regular snow, when it's been sitting out in the sun, turns into solid ice.
Yes.
Okay. It might soften up during the day when the sun's shining on it, but then you went in one way and you walked across it real easily, and then you're coming back out and the sun had gone down, and now it's solid ice.
It's like glass.
And then now you got to cross it again.
So how does a self-arrest work? I mean, obviously something that people have got to practice.
You got to practice.
I've not done one myself.
Yeah,
so you're talking about like one of those axes it's like a spike on the bottom of the handle. And, and then it's like a pickaxe.
So you got a pickaxe. There's a spike on one end and a kind of a broad head axe on the other side.
Okay.
And then they could be short ones to 3 foot long or longer.
Okay.
Used as a walking stick.
Yeah.
But you carry it in your pack, and if you get across the eye, you get it out and get ready with it. But you hold it in such a way, and you got a strap around your wrist. And when you fall and you're sliding down like this, you roll over.
Okay.
And you're holding the handle like this because that's the way you've been walking.
Okay, so you're holding it on
so
the
when
top.
you go across the thing, you're holding with the strap around there. You're holding the top of it like this.
Okay.
And when you slip and fall, you grab because one end's got a spike. You don't want to fall on that.
The bottom end, yeah.
You grab the spiky end on the bottom.
Yeah.
And you roll over and you plant the axe in the snow or ice. And as you're sliding, you're picking up on the bottom end, which digs in the handle top part. And at the same time, you're stiffening your body and getting up on your toes. Because
okay, so it's a whole procedure.
There's a whole procedure. So if your body is sliding on the snow, you can pick up some speed. It's like a toboggan.
Yeah.
But if you only got your little toes digging in, you're slowing yourself down between the axe and your two toes are the only thing touching the snow.
Yeah.
You can slow yourself down and stop.
Have you ever had to do self-arrest?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah?
We used to go out and just do them for fun, climb up on the snow and just, practice. So we just practice tripping and falling on the snow and rolling down a hill and then arresting yourself. And we would take all the park rangers up at Mount Rainier, and I was kind of in charge of teaching this because I was the one of the most experienced, but we would take them out before the tourists showed up. We'd have the park rangers would show up 2 weeks before the tourist season.
Yeah.
And we'd do all this first aid training, CPR, and then snow travel, because
Yes.
especially since, everybody wants to go out and hike around and do it on their own time, but we don't want you getting in trouble yourselves. So
Yes.
you need to know what you're doing. So
Yeah.
we would take them out there and give them the ice axes and teach them how to fall and arrest themselves so they don't go 2,000 feet down the mountain and disappear in a crevasse.
It's a good point to definitely practice, I guess, because I had a friend who did the Pacific Crest Trail, I think it's called, right? The hike all the way from
So
Mexico
there's a
up.
good example of that. You do the Pacific Crest Trail, especially, you're starting in the spring. You're going to cross a lot of snowfields along the way.
Yeah,
so you're going to want to maybe have some crampons in your pack and having that ice axe.
Yeah, and I guess that's the tricky thing. If you're doing such a long trip,
you say, well,
people don't want the weight.
I don't want the extra weight. And
suddenly you're sliding down the snowfield.
Yeah.
That's not what you want.
No.
Those crampons would be pretty handy.
Yeah. We used to build trails across on the normal trails where people would go out for a day hike and didn't know what they're doing. We'd build trails across there and then we'd scatter gravel on it.
Yeah.
So
people
could
so
safely walk across
some grip.
as long as they stayed on the trail.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about first aid in some capacity. Okay, I guess there's a few questions in my mind about this. So you said to me once, there's no point having a first aid kit if you don't know how to use it.
Exactly.
Because I might fall into that category. I have a first aid kit, and it's it's all the things that they say you should have, but I'm not very practiced with it. So what's the best way? Do you know? I mean, what's the way in which you can learn those things? I mean, obviously nowadays, I'm sure this YouTube is probably pretty handy.
Yeah, YouTube's handy, but there's wilderness medicine classes.
Okay.
I would take a wilderness first aid class as opposed to just your general first aid class, because your general first aid class, just like your general EMT or paramedic training, is based on when I got out of the Air Force and I became a civilian ambulance driver, EMT. It was like you're taught in the civilian EMT world that you're going to have this person from their accident to a hospital in under 45 minutes.
Okay.
Closer to 30 minutes or 15 minutes.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Whereas when I was in the Air Force, my paramedic training was due to you're going to find this guy after he's probably been laying out there injured for 24 hours, and then you may not be able to get him out of there for another 24 hours or more.
Yeah.
Okay, so we were allowed to do extra stuff that your normal paramedics weren't allowed to do in the field.
Like what?
Like surgical procedures, if somebody's got a cardiac tamponade, which is blood in the sac around your heart.
Okay.
Which happens a lot of times in impact injuries, with someone gets an auto accident, the steering wheel hits you in the chest. You can, just like when somebody punches you in the face, you can get a slice, your skin will burst open and start bleeding.
Yes.
Same thing can happen to your heart. Your heart can split and start bleeding, and then you end up with a blood inside the sac. And it's constricting, won't let the heart, because the sac's only so large and doesn't stretch and won't let the heart beat fully.
So it's putting pressure on.
So they taught us how to diagnose that in the field just with blood pressure, and then what to do if you have to relieve that. Or if somebody's got a pneumothorax or a hemothorax, that's where you maybe ruptured a lung and now you got blood or air filling up your lung so you can't breathe. So you got to get that air out or get that blood out.
Okay, so that's like a collapsed lung, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a civilian term for the collapsed lung.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. It collapses because you got all that, you've ruptured it. And now every time you breathe, air leaks out of your lung and it fills up that space between your lung and your...
And it just gradually
and
goes down.
And pretty soon, it's a balloon inside there, and pretty soon your lung has no room to expand because the pressure inside is greater than the pressure inside your lungs. The pressure inside your chest is greater than pressure, so you can't breathe.
It's interesting. I just did a conversation with a guy who's a surgeon talking about exactly that process of like a collapsed lung, but that's what you're actually trying to achieve when you're hunting a deer.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the other way around.
Other way around.
You're trying to achieve that. So it's actually, I guess the context is good on animals that are your quarry, bad on yourself, but
Well,
there's
yourself,
ways to do it.
and that's why they taught us in the military, because the people you're trying to rescue may have been shot
Yeah.
and may have taken a bullet through the lung on one side. Now you got to treat their collapsed lung.
Interesting. Okay.
Another thing we did, if you have airway injuries, you know, you got to put a tracheotomy in here.
Which is cutting up basically a hole in your...
Yeah, but there's an easy way of doing it. You know, if in the hospital setting they cut it down here, tracheotomy.
Kind of low.
But you have your voice box.
Yes.
And right in the center of the voice box is called you got a thyroid cartilage and a cricoid cartilage. And where those two cartilages come together, there's a space that's only covered with a thin layer of skin.
I'm feeling it right now.
Yeah, so you can punch a hole right through there.
Ah.
So we had devices that allowed you to punch through. And, of course, the old wives' tale was like, oh, you could use a ballpoint pen that you know, took apart and put that in there. It says, try breathing through a ballpoint pen that has a hole that big. That doesn't quite work. You need something with a bigger hole.
A slightly bigger tube.
Yeah. Like at least the size of this
it's like a
large metal straw.
Yeah. Okay. Handy, you already have that with you all the time. I see it, always ready. So if you were going to have like a first aid kit, like we were saying just before, what would be, you think, like the essential things to have in that first aid kit? Like, what are the things which are like just the bare minimum? If you're going to go out, what should you have?
Okay, well, you're gonna want something that maybe a tourniquet.
Okay.
A sling.
Yep.
Probably multiple slings. We used to have these slings called triangular bandages. I carry them still from the military, but they're basically triangular scarves.
Yeah.
Or big scarves.
Okay.
And you could use multiple things for that. You can use it for a tourniquet. You can use it for big bandages and whatnot. And you can, they're mainly for slinging your arm like this or whatnot.
Like, yeah, in that classic position.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, if you fall down and you go like this and you break your collarbone, you're going to want to sling your arm.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You don't want to have to walk like this.
You've got to keep it in that position. It's really painful.
And hopefully you have somebody with you to help you put that on, but there are ways of doing it yourself. But
I never even thought about that. That's got to be a tough challenge.
Well, that's a tough challenge. You break something, and how do I bandage myself? I broke my arm, and I got to bandage my arm.
Yeah.
It's like, now if you broke your leg and your two arms are so good, you could probably, make. So you want some bandages and straps so that between the tourniquets and the triangular bandage, if you broke your leg, you could get a couple branches and brace your leg and tie it up with those things. And maybe even tie it up where you made a walking cast out of it, or you can hobble out.
So just have a bit of support, but it's enough to get you out.
You got to have support enough between that and another branch for a crutch. You could hobble your way at least where you're up to a trail where you can get rescued.
Okay. Is there anything else that springs to mind for a first aid kit in terms of any like medicines or anything like that? Or?
Well, we would carry painkillers.
Yeah.
If you have some available, that always helps. It's like you might be able to hike yourself out if you had a little bit of painkiller.
Yeah. That's a good plan.
And we carried antibiotics and stuff like that, but that's for like you're going to be out there a long time.
That's more of a longer trip.
Yeah,
but a good thing to.
A good thing to think about,
Yeah. Okay.
And but one doctor told me one time, it says there's only one medicine that you could take anywhere that's good for a lot of different things. Take aspirin.
I wondered if you were going to say that. Because
there's your analgesic, your painkiller.
Yes.
It's also a blood thinner.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now you don't want to, if you have a wound that's bleeding and whatnot, you don't want to take a bunch of aspirin.
Don't want to be taking that, no.
Yeah. But it's good for a number of things,
You said about a tourniquet. Now, I want to ask a couple of questions about this. I have one.
Yeah.
And I've practiced with it a little bit, so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's like kind of, I don't know what the brand is, but it's various thing with Velcro and little metal thing that you can rotate and put it under a lot of pressure. You see things in movies or shows where people make a tourniquet from other stuff, like a belt, for instance. Or does that actually work? Is that a thing that's
it does,
doable?
but you got to be able to tighten it up enough because.
So how do you do that?
It depends on the bleeding, because if you if you tighten it around whatever you're trying to stop the bleeding of, and it's not tight enough,
Yes.
you're trying to get down where you can cut off the arterial flow.
Okay.
If you don't cut off the arterial flow, it's going to back up the venous flow and make it bleed worse.
So you got to do it right.
If you got venous bleeding and you put a tourniquet on, now generally on venous bleeding, you want something like a big bulky dressing that you can put on there and then wrap the tourniquet around. You're not using the tourniquet to cut off the arterial flow. You're using it to hold that pressure on that. So, direct pressure is the best thing for any bleeding.
Okay.
So let's say we used to have these things called battle dressings. They were big cotton dressings. And so having a big bulky dressing of some type is good.
So like a bandage.
Yeah, it's like a bandage, but this bandage came with like straps on it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You open it up and it had cloth straps attached to the bandage so you can put it on there and just tie it on.
Yeah.
So that's good for holding direct pressure. But if you don't have that, you just got a wad of gauze.
Yeah.
You can put it over the bleeding part and then take your tourniquet and cinch it over the top of it where it's holding that direct pressure, so you're not having to stand there like this.
Holding it yourself.
So you could do other things, okay, I did this, now I got to take care of some other survival things while I'm...
Yeah. Other things, obviously, the list is probably quite long at that point.
Yeah.
So with the tourniquet, this is interesting because I don't know where I heard this from, but it sounds like what you're saying is, say for instance a leg injury like you were just showing, you were kind of doing some actions there. You're saying apply the tourniquet on where the actual wound is the place to do it, because I heard also there's a thought way doing it as high up close to the body is another way of doing it.
If the tourniquet's left on too long, you're going to lose whatever's there.
You're going to lose that joint or that
leg,
that appendage.
So let's say you got a bad cut and you cut an artery that's down in your calf or down in your ankle.
Okay.
You don't want to put it up here around your thigh.
Because you could lose your whole leg.
You could lose your whole legs. The idea is to put it just above whatever you're trying to do. But you got to realize, too, that you got artery. You're trying to shut off the blood flow of the arteries. And if you put it where it's too deep, you may not be able to do that. So it's good to know some anatomy, knowing that your main arteries feeding your legs, your femoral arteries in the inside of your legs. So you would take something bulky and put it right here and then strap the tourniquet over the top of it. So you're pushing in.
Okay, in your groin.
On that groin, you're pushing in on that artery.
Oh, so on the side of your groin, you're saying like even just something like a pebble or a stone to add that like extra pressure in that area.
And the pressure just in that area.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's a good thing to know.
The other thing good about it, let's say you walking out, this happened to a friend of mine last year or a year before. He was out hiking, just trying to stay in shape. He goes out with his pack and he hikes up the hill and whatnot. And he got bit by a rattlesnake. And he didn't know it. He
didn't realize?
Well, he's hiking, he's in shorts and stuff, and he's going up through grassy area. And what happens when you're out hiking? So, I come home all the time, and it's
cuts.
I got a cut or a bruise or something, and I didn't notice it. And, when he did that same thing, and there's like 2 fang marks in his calf. And, he thought he got poked with a stick or something.
Yeah.
And
so what happened?
Well, he ended up having to go to the hospital and get some antivenom, but he had some serious issues because it had been so long since there. But if you'd have known that what had happened, you take the tourniquet and you put it on what we call a constriction band, where you're not trying to shut off the arterial flow. You're trying to shut off just the return venous flow. Okay, because when a snake bites you, they usually don't get down to your arteries. They get into your veins and they get into your lymph system. So you're trying to put that constriction band to cut off the lymph system so it doesn't go up your leg.
Yeah.
And if you do that, you might be able to walk out to help, even though you've been bit by the rattlesnake or the other poisonous snake.
It sounds like a bit of a nuanced thing that you've got to know what you're doing when you do it.
Yeah.
'Cause if you get it wrong, potentially.
Yeah.
Is it kind of like a thing where if you did it the wrong way, it could make things worse? Or
not really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
We
just have to check.
It's more like kind of like when you sleep on your arm or leg the wrong way and you wake up and it's kind of tingling and numb.
Numb.
You know.
Okay. Okay. It's achieving the same kind of thing.
Kind of achieving the same kind of thing, but you're trying to cut off that venous flow and that lymph flow.
Yes.
Lymphatic system flow.
Okay.
But anyway, we could spend all day talking about wilderness medicine. But
it's good.
The point is that you should know some of this stuff before you venture out.
Yeah, but I think that the goal of this conversation is to kind of inspire people, teach them some things, because I mean, it's crazy. These kinds of conversations, I've heard stories before about other podcasts where people have an interview with someone doing wilderness survival or whatever, and it's amazing how your brain, when you're in a tricky situation, your brain just goes straight to that one fact that you heard that one time, and a ping, it's there, and I think it can make a difference, right?
It can, yeah.
Obviously, at the very least that, but hopefully inspiration to people to get out there and just kind of become a bit more aware of everything that's going on and how to solve problems. But I guess the thing I was going to say now, we've covered it. I mean, the thing also, you are ticking this list off for me. You're saying we're talking all over the place, but you're ticking a lot of things on my list, Dennis. So. Okay. So maybe then it feels like a good time to talk a little bit about terrain. And we talked a bit about mountains. So the things I've got here is mountains, oceans, and then desert terrain. But then you also have jungle, which you threw in as extra wild card there, which I like. Bonus points for Dennis there. Maybe we can talk about mountains a bit more. I guess, like for me, what are the common watch outs? You've already talked about ice, self-arresting.
Well, part of the mountains, the biggest watch out is the weather.
Yes.
I mean, because you could have, when I worked at Mount Rainier created its own weather.
Yeah.
It could be beautiful weather, 100 degrees all around the mountain, and it's storming on the mountain.
Really?
Yeah. Just because it was so big and stuck up in the middle of nowhere, it created its own weather.
Wow.
So just you have to know that when you go in places like that.
So the forecast isn't necessarily...
The forecast, and also be able to read the clouds. What does that lenticular cloud mean?
Yeah.
You know? It might mean some weather's coming in.
Okay, so it's about reading what's going on.
Yeah.
Properly, and I guess that's a whole thing as well. I mean,
that's a whole thing in itself, but there's, some good to learn some meteorological things that, what does that mean, Has there ever been any moments? The Native Americans learned it, just understand what that means when the cloud looks like that.
So are there any times when you've had a bit of that knowledge and just like contrary to the forecast, you've seen some things going on in the sky and decided to change your plans?
Yeah.
And it's got you out of tricky situations?
Yeah. Just know that it's like, okay, the wind always blows from the northwest here, right?
Yeah.
And now today it's blowing from the south. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Okay, that means the low pressure front's coming in.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's going to affect
And then you can look
everything.
at some other things to see how quickly you think that it might change,
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great point.
It was like on the East Coast, it was always a red sky in morning, sailor take warning.
Yes. And then there's a follow-up to that as well, isn't there? Isn't it?
Yeah,
red sky at night.
Sailor's delight.
Okay, shepherd's delight. I heard in England,
Yeah,
but I guess
yeah,
it's similar.
same thing.
It's a similar kind of vibe.
Yeah.
So then, weather is one thing. I've got things here like hypothermia. Is it hypo or hyper? I think it's hypo is when your temperature drops.
Hypothermia when it drops. Hyper when you get
you're hot.
Heat exhaustion, heat stroke.
So I'm sure we'll get to hyper once we're in a different area. So hypothermia is definitely an issue if you're up on a big mountain.
Hypothermia is an issue, yeah.
And altitude, like you remember you telling me before that there's a bit of a spicy cocktail of those two things together can create some bad situations. And so maybe you can tell me a bit about that, and then also if there's ways to counteract
let's talk about altitude sickness.
Okay.
Okay, so as you're going up in altitude, some people start getting headaches.
Yeah.
And, you might get hypoxic, you might get dizzy.
Yes.
Okay, like you smoked a joint or something. Anyway.
I've never happened. Never
happened
before.
So I used to tell people, I says, I don't need it. I don't need that. I says, I just climb up a mountain. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Or my high school teacher used to say, he says, you don't need that. He says, just lay down for a while and then jump up real fast.
Yeah, it's like literally getting high.
Yeah. But, I mean, that's why they call it getting high, because it had the same kind of effect.
Yeah.
So, and I've seen people do stupid things when they get up at altitude because you're not thinking straight. And there's ways of combating that also. You know, people think that, what the saying is air gets thinner when you get up in altitude.
Yes.
Well, it really doesn't.
Oh, it doesn't. Okay.
No. What gets thinner is the fact that, let's say you ever had a bag of potato chips when you went up in altitude and it got blown up like that?
Super puffy.
Super puffy. Or if you have a balloon, you could blow it up a little bit ways and you take it up to altitude and almost like gets bigger as you go up.
Yeah.
Well, the same thing happens to your lungs. Your lungs are down here used to breathing at sea level.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we go up to 10,000 feet and your lungs are already inflated.
Yes.
So you're trying to inflate them more, and you're sitting there going,
Okay, so they're already full, effectively.
they're already full, and you're trying to breathe, and you can't breathe because they're already full. They're already inflated.
So that's what's going on.
That's what's going on. The air's not thinner. It's your lungs are full, and you don't have as much capacity to suck in fresh air, so you're building up carbon dioxide because you're not blowing out that carbon dioxide.
Because you effectively
You're
got
like
much
hyperventilating because you're going, and you're not exhaling. And
Interesting.
that's what makes you dizzy. That's what makes you high. Okay, so mountain climbers, we learn this technique called pressure breathing.
Yeah.
And what that is your lungs are already full.
Yeah.
And so you got to think about this because it's not natural.
Okay.
Is instead of breathing in, you just concentrate on breathing out. You use the strength of your ribs to expel that air out of your lungs, and then you just relax and they inflate automatically.
Does it by itself?
Does it by itself because you're already up at altitude. So that's what happens when you get up that high is you got to do the pressure breathing, otherwise you're going to pass out and get high and pass out.
So then you're actually optimizing what space you have.
What space you have. I mean, even when we're doing here, when I'm breathing normally,
Yeah.
I can still force out more.
Which means you could, yeah.
You know, okay. That's what we do when we cough. We go, you know.
And that clears, and it gives you a deeper breath
Gives you a
afterwards.
deeper breath.
Interesting.
You know.
Okay, so then that's a way of dealing with altitude.
That's altitude and altitude sickness.
And that helps. And is there any like confusion that happens with that as well? Like
Well,
that's how you help prevent confusion?
That's how you help prevent confusion, because as your CO2 level builds up,
You get delirious.
you get delirious. And, you know, and then the same thing will happen if you're getting hypothermic, especially if you're at altitude and getting hypothermic, is when you get hypothermic, when your body temperature drops a couple degrees, you start getting delirious. And you don't realize it. I mean, I had a friend who was climbing with a buddy up in a mountain in Chile, and his buddy just, for no apparent reason, disconnected from the rope and then slipped and fell and died.
Wow.
And was never recovered because it was up one of those big mountains. And then he had to make it down the mountain by himself without being roped up for safety.
Without a climbing buddy.
Without a climbing buddy, because his climbing buddy just killed himself.
And
But people do that all the time, you know.
it's wild.
You know.
So no logical reason, just for some reason your brain thinks, oh,
you
it's a
just
good
don't
idea.
think. You don't tie in. You don't. You know. You learn how to set those rope anchors and whatnot, and
Yeah.
you don't think of do it. You learn how to do ice axe arrest, but you don't think about it when you fall.
Yes.
And you're just out of it. So another story at Mount Rainier. So I've come to a similar situation before. Had these guys come down to the ranger station and say our buddy fell and injured himself. He dislocated his hip or shoulder. I forget which one it was. And
Yeah.
he's skiing. These guys were doing like mountaineering skiing. We hike up the mountain and ski down. And then he fell and dislocated something. And his buddies came down to get help for him.
Yeah.
And again, you know, it's like, we can't get a helicopter in here now. The mountain's fogged in, and
Yeah.
you're going to go with me and we're going to go up and find him. So we went back up there and found him, and the guy was in hypothermia at the time. And so I whipped out what I always carried in my backpack, which was my gas Alpine stove, and fired up the stove and heated up some Gatorade and had him drink it. He was not unconscious. He just wasn't in his right mind. And then as soon as he drank that warm Gatorade, it was like 5 minutes. He was, where am I? You know.
Wow, just like clear-headed.
Just like
again.
that, clear-headed again. You know, oh, we're going to bundle you up here and put you on this sled, and we're going to sled you down to the ranger station.
But beforehand, he had no idea.
He had no idea. He just was out of it. You know.
Wow.
But that's why people, you know, that get hypothermia, say they just, you know, go to sleep.
I guess it's got to be hard to try and have presence of mind, especially if you're on your own and you could be getting into that situation.
And one of the ways to tell is you go through a shivering phase.
Okay.
And if the shivering goes away, that's when you've gone into delirium and hypothermia, and you're going to just, oh, I'm warm now, and I'm just going to lay down. And
I feel better.
I feel better. I'm going to go to sleep now.
And isn't there a thing as well where people actually, like, they perceive that their body temperature is going up, and they even take off some clothes?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So is that like another phase in the
Yeah.
thing?
It's like you're like past the shivering phase, and now you're feeling warm, and you're getting delirious, and it's like, oh.
Just take all my clothes off.
You might think it's summertime now because
you don't know what's going on.
you don't know what's going on.
Because I have heard stories, I'm sure you have many more, but like stories of people who are found, you know, dead, but there's like a trail of clothes that they just take.
Yeah, they're taking clothes
walking
as they're going around because now they think they're hot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a good tip to know. Like if you stop shivering, then you really got to try and make.
You're
a
in
plan.
trouble. Yeah.
And
so you should have a way to make a fire and heat up some liquid, even if it's just water.
Yeah, and just drink it.
And just drink it. Yeah.
That's a quick way to get heat into your body.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know.
The other thing that happens when people get hypothermic is your first thing is your extremities shut down.
Like your fingers and
Yeah.
toes.
So your body's trying to serve your brain and your torso, where your organs are.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you rewarm somebody, you know, used to be the old thing is like, okay, you get them back, you put them in a warm bath. Mm-hmm. Well, they've had people that you put them in the warm bath and they have a heart attack because you got all this ketoacidosis built up in the extremities, and when you warm them up, and all of a sudden your vessels go like this and
like expand,
and all that toxic ketoacidosis goes in and hits your heart at the same time.
Wow.
And so, I mean, so what they always taught us to do is if you're going to put somebody in a warm bath to warm them up, you leave their arms and legs out of the bath. You warm up their torso first until they're in it, and then you slowly warm up by having them in a warm room or something, you warm up the extremities.
Wow, I had no idea that was an issue.
Yeah.
There's so many things to know about.
The other thing to be aware of, you know, sometimes people are out hiking and they come across hot springs.
Yeah.
Oh, let's jump in the hot springs. The Forest Service has closed a number of hot springs up in the Sierra because they find dead people in the hot springs.
For the same kind of reason?
Well, could be the same reason, but a lot of times it's because some of these hot springs are putting out carbon monoxide gas or even carbon dioxide gas.
Yes.
Which is heavier than air, and it's laying on the surface of the hot spring there. They come, hot spring, and they get in there and soak in like this, and then suck in the gas, and then they're dead.
Wow. Wow. There's a hot spring I love going to, not far from here.
Yeah.
Make sure that I don't do it on my own, I think. Wow, that's a good thing to be aware of.
Yeah. Just make sure it's one that has good air circulation, you know.
Yes. Yeah. Great. Okay, there's only a couple of other things on this mountains section. Unless there's something else that pings into your mind. But I'd say avalanches. What's a kind of good thing to be aware of with avalanches? Because, I mean, I don't know if Mount Rainier is that a common issue there?
Yeah.
But like if you're in a snowy environment.
If you're in a snowy environment, one is know the forecast and maybe what the conditions were previously, because if you get like snow, and then you get a few days of warm weather, or a week of warm weather, and then you know how when it gets warm in the sun, and you're on a south-facing slope, and you know that snow melted and then froze into ice, and then you get a cold front comes in and it drops another 2 feet of snow on top of that ice. You got that slick, but that's where you're going to have avalanches. So when I went to avalanche school, they have you go in there and cut it's a good thing to do if you're going to go out, even if you're going to go out in, cross-country skiing and stuff, is find a snowbank and cut down into the snowbank and do a cross-section and say, oh, powder, ice, older snow, powder.
Yeah.
You look at those different layers and see what it consists of.
So there's a forecast right there.
There's a forecast right there. So this is not good. And that's what the Ski Patrol and others go out and do when they put out the avalanche warnings, you know.
Yes.
You know, and then if you're out there too, you don't want to be by yourself, and you want to carry your avalanche beacon.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
so what's that?
Well, an avalanche beacon is it's a short-range little radio that, let's say, well, we need to go from here to here, but this is an avalanche slope because there's no trees, you know.
Yeah.
And anyway, so we're going to turn on our avalanche beacons. So if somebody gets caught in an avalanche and ends up buried, their other friends can use their beacons to find them.
Okay.
So
so it's a thing about just being aware.
We just carry these avalanche beacons. And then there's also other things we do, too, is like you're out cross-country skiing, there's these things you can wear on your ankles and attach to your skis. And basically it's a bright fluorescent orange or pink color string that's in a little pouch. So when you fall and whatnot, this thing might stretch out. So you might be buried 10 feet under, but your string is up on the surface.
And is the string attached to the ski, or it's just
attached to you?
It's attached to you and only you.
Well, it's attached to you, but it may be attached to your ski. So when you separate from the ski pulls it out.
And then it starts.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you had any situations with avalanches that you've been around, like doing rescuing people in avalanches?
I haven't for real.
Okay.
We were lucky enough or smart enough not to be out in areas where we were.
Situation.
But yeah.
Is there anything they tell you, say you haven't done your homework and you're in the or maybe you have and you're just unlucky. An avalanche comes rumbling down at you. What is like the best thing you can do? Like, is there anything that you can do?
Well, there's some things they tell you can do. I mean, it's snow, and you hope that it's light, powdery snow, which not always is, but you can try to swim your way with the avalanche. You know, first of all, you know, it's like, unlike they show in the movies where the guy sees the avalanche coming, he takes off in his ski or snowboard and outruns the avalanche downhill.
Yeah.
The avalanche is going to go down a chute someplace. You see it coming, go forward or backwards as fast as you can.
It's just not in the channel.
So you're not in the channel.
So understand that it's like a river, basically.
It could be like a river, you know. Yeah, you could have a big slab avalanche that might be, 200 yards across that comes down too.
Yeah.
But generally, it's going to funnel down the canyon. Whatever, all the mountains are sloped down to a drainage. It's going to funnel down to drainage.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be down at the bottom of the drainage when the thing goes.
No. And I've got to ask, like, you see, it's swimming in an avalanche. What? So, like, what
well,
you actually mean? Like, you can like kind of take a swimming action.
It'd be just like you were surfing in a wave. You know, you got caught in a wave out here, and you're surfing your way in. You know, yeah.
Wild.
You're trying to stay up the top of it when it's going down.
Yeah.
And then if you get rolled and tumbled, then you want to make a pocket so you have air to breathe. So you want to be maybe doing this or around your face.
So like flapping your arms around.
Yeah.
So
you want to keep your face clear, so when you come to a stop, you're not smothered by all this snow in your face and mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a few days ago, there was somebody in, I think it was Wyoming or Colorado, that just died in an avalanche.
Wow.
They're usually people that are very experienced, or at least they say they're experienced mountaineers, like.
Yeah.
because they're out there all the time.
But stuff goes wrong every now and then. And
But they said, hey, it's because they had this light snow fall on, hadn't snowed for a while, and they had a crusty top, and then they had a big snowfall of light snow, and then people, we always, the skiers, it's, new powder, let's get out there and go. Well, that's avalanche territory.
yeah. Oh, for sure. One more question. This might be a silly one, but, and I don't know if this is necessarily completely relevant to mountains. It's really more relevant to like any time you're out in the wild, but animal encounters like black bears, mountain lions, those kinds of things. I mean, any thoughts about like practices, good practice, or like have you ever rescued people that have been attacked by predators? I mean, it's actually not that common, is it?
It's generally not that common, but they all have a common thread. Okay, like just recently here, a guy was killed here in California.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And up by Georgetown. And him and his brother were out shed hunting.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they were hunting antlers that had been dropped over the winter by the deer. And if anybody know where a lot of these animals in California where they drop their antlers, it's when they're going through brush.
That's because it's stuff's grabbing it.
It's stuff's grabbing, stuff like that. So
okay.
When they're going to and from their hiding areas.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So these guys were probably crawling around on their hands and knees under the manzanita or the buckbrush.
Yeah.
Following deer trails.
Yeah.
And crawling on all fours or at least bending down.
Yeah.
And the mountain lion probably that triggered their prey response. I mean, because it was why do mountain lions attack certain people? Like there was one in Southern California. I remember that there's been several of them down there, but one in particular, the mountain lion was basically watching this biking trail.
Yes.
Probably seeing hundreds of people going by every day.
Yeah.
Why did he pick one guy to kill?
To attack.
And when they did the investigation, this guy was off his bike down on the ground repairing a flat. Okay. One of the first ones in California was down in Southern California, down by San Diego. The lady was out jogging on a popular jogging trail, and she was attacked. Well, she had stopped to bend down to tie her shoe, probably right in front of the mountain lion, and that triggered the predator response. There was another one up in the redwoods up here, same thing, an old guy out hiking, and he stopped to tie his shoe, and the mountain lion attacked him.
So it's like a moment of weakness.
Well, it's a moment of weakness, but it's they're not looking for people to attack.
Yeah.
But they just see shapes, and all of a sudden they see a shape that's on all fours.
And quite vulnerable looking.
Got a nice neck there to grab, and this triggers their instinct. It's like I had somebody call me one time and said, we saw a mountain lion go through our yard.
Yeah.
Okay, that's nice. They want a fishing game to come do something about that. I said, well, fishing game, the state of California, people voted to make mountain lions specially protected mammals, which means they have endangered species status even though they're far from endangered.
Huh.
Okay, so we can't do anything with them. We just got to leave them alone.
Okay.
So we can't, because you saw a mountain lion, we can't come out here and kill the mountain lion.
Yeah.
The only thing we can do is if it's attacked a person or attacked livestock. Okay. Then we can give a depredation permit to kill the lion. They can call the government hunter in to come catch and trap and
manage the situation.
Kill the lion.
Yes. Okay.
So.
So go on. Sorry.
Anyway, just forgot my train of thought, but.
Well, we're talking about bears and mountain lions.
Yeah.
And
so
what the best kind of thing to do is like best practices. Basically.
The best practices is to not look like their prey.
Just be aware. I
be
guess.
aware. Like the sign says, be bear aware.
Yeah.
Okay. And you have to realize too, like like in some of these states, the grizzly bear population is getting pretty high.
Yeah.
And the grizzly bears, like our mountain lions here, because we don't hunt the mountain lions anymore, they're not afraid of humans. So they're right. I mean, I have them go through my yard all the time and catch them on a security camera.
I have it right here too.
Yeah, so they're here. You just got to learn to live with them. If you have deer anywhere in the country, you have mountain lions, whether you realize it or not.
Yeah.
Usually you don't see them, but more and more you're seeing them out in broad daylight here.
They just don't,
they're not usually
phased.
You can tell there's a lion in the neighborhood by the lost cat signs going up on trees.
They're all over the place here.
Because the first thing, lions are very territorial. They want to get rid of all the other felines in the area. So they kill the cats that they can catch.
It's competition.
Unless you have a smart cat that's got the savvy of a bobcat, they're competition. Just like wolves kill any other dogs or coyotes that are in their area, and mountain lions kill any other felines that are in the area. It's competition,
Ah, that's interesting.
I mean, they kill each other when their territories overlap. So the problem with mountain lions is used to be when their primary food source, which is deer, when the population of deer would drop, their ranges would expand looking for more deer, and then they'd cross other mountain lions, and then they would fight, and one of them would get killed. And so their lion population would stay stable with the deer population. Okay. It would drop when the deer population. Well, the problem is with people around, and we have dogs and cats and sheep and goats and other livestock, the lion population doesn't drop. When they run out of deer, they find other things to eat.
Yes, alpacas in someone's
alpacas,
yard.
And turkeys have become one of their favorite food. Turkeys are not native to California, but we have lots of turkeys around, and so
that's interesting.
They'll eat turkeys, they'll eat pigs, wild pigs and whatnot.
Okay.
So their population does. So don't look like they're four-legged.
Everything that they
everything they want to eat.
Okay, that's a good tip.
Don't dress like a turkey. And bears are the same way. The black bears are getting less afraid of people because we're not hunting them as much anymore. And then especially grizzly bears. Grizzly bears have learned that, and I'm sure some areas, some of the black bears learning the same thing. When they hear a gunshot, they go towards the gunshot.
Because there's going to be a snack.
There's going to be a snack. We're going to leave a gut pile or a whole animal laying there for them to eat, and they'll fight you for it.
I mean, that's interesting. I mean, I didn't. I wasn't using a gun at the time, but actually further up north than here in Northern California, I shot a buck and then left it for a little bit to go before tracking, and a bear was right on it straight away. So that was a bit of a surprise.
Yeah.
Come around the corner and there's a lot of bite marks and holes in my deer straight away. So. But I mean, that's a slightly different situation.
Yeah.
So maybe, unless there's anything else with mountainous kind of terrain that you think is worth talking about, we could move on to what do you want to do next? Do you want to do deserts or oceans or jungles? Take your pick.
I'll do deserts.
Let's do deserts. Okay, so it seems like the obvious major danger. I mean, myself and my wife spent a bit of time living in Joshua Tree. And I was surprised that I think it was the first time we went for our hike on the trail, there was a sign saying, these people are missing, we don't know where they are. And actually it turned out that they'd been missing only for 2 or 3 days. But they were never, it took a long time before they were found. And even in the time that we were there for about 6 months, there were at least 4 people who died out in Joshua Tree National Park, just near where we were staying. So I guess dehydration and the effect of sun, just one sun, sun and exposure is a major thing. Is there anything like a frame of mind or any good approaches for like a low water, high heat environment?
No, you want to have water with you.
I mean, it sounds obvious, right?
Obviously, but not just a little bottle of water,
Yeah.
You might need a gallon or two.
Right.
So, I mean,
more than you think.
Hydration pack with you, a lot of water, and maybe even think about ways of making water or finding water.
Right.
Okay.
Which is not always easy if you're in an environment like that.
Yeah, but there's one thing they taught us how to make a solar still.
Okay.
Okay, where you could get some fresh water out of some plant material like cactus or something, or even your urine.
How does that work?
Well, you basically take a piece of plastic
Okay.
and you dig a hole. You put your cup at the bottom of the hole, and then you put some moisture, either peat in the hole, or you put some plant material, some chopped up cactus or stuff in there, in the hole, and you put a piece of plastic over the hole, cover it over, and put a stone in the center of it so it makes a cone.
Yes.
And then as things start cooking in there,
And evaporating.
it evaporates, it hits the plastic and runs down to that point and then drips into your cup.
Ah. So it's basically acting like a water filter through evaporation.
Evaporative water filter, yeah.
Interesting.
So you don't have to do like Bear Grylls and drink your urine directly. You can like make some fresh water out of it. If you,
unless you like the taste.
Unless you like the taste. You can make a solar still and extract the freshness out of it.
Because that's at least something that there's definitely going to be abundance of.
Yeah.
An abundance of in the desert, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's a good thing to know. So,
Stay away from the choyas.
yes, they're the super spiky cacti, right?
The jumping choyas, we called them.
Oh, okay.
You probably had some experience with those by Joshua Tree.
Yeah, for sure. They're the ones that are like just super, super fine spiky, is it?
Well, yeah, they got like 2-inch long spikes that are super sharp, and they seem like if you just get close to them, they jump on you
just
and
get you.
But if you just barely brush them, they're all through you.
Yeah, is that the ones that also like stick to you?
Yeah, they stick to you. You can't
just
get them off.
break
'cause
off
They're
and-
like barbed and stuff.
And that stuff, it just doesn't. It like
Yeah.
does something, right? It doesn't. It stays in there a bit. It like aggravates your
Oh
skin.
yeah, it's gonna get infected and stuff if you don't get the spikes out. You know?
Not.
I mean,
ideal.
I've had them where you got to get the spikes out by pushing them all the way through your finger to pull out the other way because they're kind of all barbed. Yeah.
Oh. Wow, that sounds savage.
It is. But we always, sometimes we do some military operation where we do parachuting out in the desert, and it was always don't land in the choyas.
So you're like, as you're flying in, desperately keeping an eye out to
Looking
try.
for the choyas, so you don't land in the choyas.
Did anyone land in
Oh
it?
yeah, we always had somebody land in the choyas.
Oh
Then we had some medical practice after that with some tweezers. And
Oh, you definitely don't want to be the one who gets that. Like,
Yeah.
Oh, that short end of the straw, or
Yeah.
short end of the choya, I guess is the term.
But you can find other cactuses that aren't so spiny that you can chop up and get some water from.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then, I guess, if you are getting lost, because this seems to be what happened to people, is that they get disorientated.
Yeah, because everything kind of looks the same out
Yeah,
there.
it's hard to tell.
Go over 2 ridges, and it's like one of the things I tell people when you're out hiking is, especially if you're going to come back the same way, you're going in and you're going to come back out the same way.
Yeah.
Every few minutes, turn around and look behind you.
Yeah.
One, to make sure that grizzly bear's not stalking you.
Yeah.
The other reason is to see what it looks like on the way back, so you recognize it.
Yes.
Things look different when you're walking the other direction.
That's a great point.
Yeah, and just remember some of the landmarks. A big rock, a unique tree, something like that. And
That's a very good point.
back in, they used to teach as Boy Scouts. You'd make the little stone mounds, with the 3 rocks and stuff to mark your trails.
I think they call it like a cairn, maybe
Yeah.
in I don't know if they call it there. Call it a cairn in the US, but I know in the United Kingdom they have cairns, and they're always very handy navigational tools.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's a really good point, and it's something. It's very hard
So
to
in the
remember
desert,
to do
in the
that.
desert, you don't have unique trees. You might have a unique cactus or a unique rock or something like that. But things start to look the same after you've,
Yeah. I guess last question I've got in my mind. Say you do get lost and you're in a pretty dire situation. You don't have very much water, or at least you have a limited amount of water. What's the best? Is there any steps or things that you should do if you're in a situation where you're like, you don't know where you are and you don't know where you need to go? I mean, if it's a desert, should you wait until nighttime before you start trying to maneuver, or then you can't see? So
you can't see, but if you're on a trail or something, nighttime's a better time to travel than than out in the heat of the day.
Right, if it's a hot time.
You know, or maybe at dusk or something like that when the sun goes down.
Yes.
So yeah, but you're trying to get back. But if you're just kind of waiting things out, you don't want to be wandering around out there delirious in the sun.
Right.
You know.
Is there just like
I always go by what Daniel Boone once said when somebody asked him if he'd ever been lost when he was exploring.
Okay.
He said he'd never been lost. He says, mighty bewildered for 3 days once, but he was never lost. So I've never been lost. You know, I might have been not exactly sure where I was at the time, but I was able to, you know, keep a cool head about it and figure out where I was.
Yeah. I think that's a good point that you make there. It's about mindset, right?
It's about mindset. I mean, you could be up climbing on a mountain in the snow and the fog comes in and all of a sudden you get vertigo and it's like you don't know which way's up, you know.
Yes.
It's like, okay, now which way do I go?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
That was always a hazard coming down off of Mount Rainier. You get into clouds and then it's like, okay, if I go this way, I die. If I got to go this way to live and stay on the glacier. If I go this way, I end up in a crevasse. And it's like...
So it helps
so
to
you
be
have to
calm.
kind of know where you are. That's what GPSs help now. But
yes.
we used to climb Mount Rainier before there was GPS, you know.
You just have to figure a few things out.
Yeah. Well, you stay on the trail that everybody else is taking.
Yep. That generally helps, I
yeah.
guess.
You don't try to take that shortcut and get off where there's no other footprints, you know, and end up not knowing where you are all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's I guess like an expanded awareness of the details of what's going on.
Yeah, same thing out in the desert, you know. You got trails and you stay on those trails and stay where you've marked and stuff.
Yeah.
The other thing about deserts too is, wildlife.
Yeah.
I mean, we have poisonous lizards and poisonous snakes in the desert, probably more than we have elsewhere.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And some of those Mojave rattlesnakes are nasty critters. You know. I've
met a couple of them.
I mean, they'll be 100 yards away from you and they'll rattle at you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, right. Forgive me if I forget now. Did we talk about best practice? We did. We talked about tourniquets if you get bitten by a snake and that kind of stuff, right? So is that's the best practice if you get bitten? Basically, you need to try and get to help as quickly as possible.
Yeah, because they used to. When I was a kid, we carried the snake bite kits.
Okay.
Had a scalpel in there, you know. The whole thing was like, okay, if you get bit by a snake, you got the 2 holes and you slice through the 2 holes with the scalpel and then slice across on there, and then it's had a suction thing there, and then you
sucks it out,
suck the blood out, you know, or you suck it out.
But is that actually real? Does that actually work?
No.
Okay.
They don't make those anymore, but that was the thing at the time, was to suck out the blood. Is that what you had to do?
Yeah.
Now, when I was going through medical training and whatnot, there were some statistics there about snake bites, and it turned out that a rattlesnake bite, the number of people who got bit by a rattlesnake and got treated and got bit by a rattlesnake and didn't get treated, the death rate was exactly the same.
Oh.
So it's basically like a bee sting. If you're allergic to bees and you get stung by a bee, you're probably going to die if you don't have your EpiPen.
Yeah.
If you get bit by a rattlesnake and you're allergic to the venom, you're probably going to die whether you get treatment or not.
So I have a question. This is a hypothetical question. If you take an EpiPen when you're not having, is it anaphylactic shock, or is that the reaction that when you take an EpiPen? Mm-hmm. Is that really bad to take an EpiPen if you're not?
Well, it
having
could
a
be
crazy
because
reaction?
the whole idea is it's stimulating your heart to pump more.
Okay, well, I'm just wondering about hedging your bets. Say you get bitten by a rattlesnake, but you don't know if you're going to have a crazy reaction.
I would not do that.
You would not do that?
I would not do that. Because that's going to increase your heart rate, which is going to make the venom travel quicker.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You want to kind of try to relax, and if you have ice, you want to put a cold pack on it.
Okay.
Just to slow down the blood flow.
Just to really chill the whole area.
Yeah.
Good.
If you have an ice bath, jump in the ice bath. You know.
Okay.
Those are popular now, so that'd be a good time to jump in your ice bath. You know.
Okay, good. Don't panic and borrow your friend's EpiPen.
No.
Just like suddenly start injecting yourself.
I mean, if you start getting the anaphylactic reaction where your throat starts closing down and stuff like, then yes.
Then that's the signs of the thing. If you're wheezing and you can't get your airway clear.
Yeah.
Right. That's a wrap. I want to give a big thanks again to Dennis for all the stories and educational nuggets that he showered us with there. I'm lucky to have this guy as my neighbor. I'm probably going to try and pop over there in a day or two. Although I'm sad crabbing season's over. Yeah, anyway, we digress. If you enjoyed this episode, then by all means, share it with a friend. I'm guessing maybe one of those accident-prone buddies that you have would be a good choice. Someone who's always getting into a bit of trouble. I actually think that might be me, to be honest. Speaking of which, I did manage to roll a big boulder on my leg the other day. But thankfully, nothing too damaging. And, I was only in the middle of nowhere with no one around and no phone signal, but it was all good. Nothing bad happened. So, if you know someone like me, then by all means, share this pod, maybe save a life. Maybe that's an overclaim. Maybe not. Better safe than sorry, I guess. Right, that's all for now. Dennis will be back for another round of survival stories in a few weeks' time. But in the meantime, stay safe out there and try to think, what would Dennis do? Thanks for listening, everyone, and until next time.